Before we get started, please tell everyone what your costume is because I love it so
Okay.
much.
This year, as inspired by the Olympic Games, I'm not going to be the Australian breakdancer. I know you're brokenhearted. I'm going to be Yusuf, the shooter from Turkey. I can't resist. So I got the glasses, I got the gray hair, I got the steely expression, and the Turkiye shirt I'll be wearing, and of course the hand in the pocket and the pistol. So that's what I'm going at as we're going trick-or-treating tonight.
So creative. I love it. So, on that note, let's get started. And some people do come in when they do. So, like, hey, Alex, welcome, welcome. You just made it before we got started. Okay, Jeff, super excited to have you on the show today. We are going to be talking about communication strategies for privacy professionals, data protection professionals, and folks in cybersecurity. Jeff will be talking about real world examples, strategies to communicate without using fear-based messaging to hopefully inspire the desired actions that you're looking from your team. So Jeff's career has spanned over 20 years in cybersecurity communications. He is passionate about privacy and there's synergies between the two disciplines. So Jeff is here to share practical strategies that blend his expertise in cybersecurity with the privacy world. So we're going to talk, Jeff and me, for about 10, 15 minutes or so. This part will be recorded, and then we'll open it to audience Q&A where we will turn off the recording. So feel free to ask any kind of question you want without fear of it being recorded forever. All right. Also, and as a reminder, Jeff's not a lawyer. I'm not a lawyer. None of us are lawyers. So none of this is legal advice. This is just general information for you to learn. All right. So first, Jeff, we had a unique way to get to this topic. So privacy communication is new. I've never done a webinar on this, and it came from a session that we were on. You were a guest on our show. I'm sorry, or a participant in the audience
Yep.
at one of our prior shows, and we were talking about struggling with privacy communication. So that spurred what we're doing today. But I'd really
Absolutely.
like to hear from you how you've been communicating people in a cyber context without negative prompts, without overwhelming people and that. So can you just read us up into your world a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So my background, so in full transparency, not a privacy person. Very interested. We are all as average ordinary people so hopelessly and helplessly naked in cyberspace, at least our identities and our data. So that's really the overlap for me on how what can I do to communicate how people can help themselves in a privacy standpoint, but also be, leverage my experience from security. Um, in that overlap, there's ultimately three things that come about here in in the advice that I can give. And we can drill into each one of them. There's the necessity of making things relevant to your audience. Okay, you've really got to stay on who they are and where they are. We'll talk more about that. Then separately, there's motivating them. Okay, you have to get their attention in a way that means something to them, but also then motivate them in a way that's meaningful to them. That doesn't do everything. Okay, informing them and getting their attention, all that stuff doesn't really do it. You then have to incite action. And motivation and inciting action are actually two completely different things. So we'll talk through each one of these as we go through.
I just love the framework of that because I think for me, I often just share information, but I forget those last 2 points where you motivate them and then have them do the action. So that's what I'm
Right.
super interested in hearing about. So
Yep.
you're talking about making your messages relevant. So how do
Yes.
you go ahead and have that empathy and step into someone's shoes? Can you delve into that a little bit deeper?
Yeah, absolutely. So, um, let me organize my thoughts here. I want to stick with that framework of relevance and motivation and then causing action. The big story on relevance is meet them where they are. Okay. Um, that's ultimately three things, and we'll talk about there's a method of threes. We'll talk about that in a bit. There's understanding their priorities. There's addressing their needs, and then there's using language that's accessible to them. Okay. You must remember that they're not lawyers, they're not attorneys, they're not compliance people. You're talking to average, ordinary humans trying to get them to be aware of something or do something. So, uh, for example, if you're thinking about how some action on privacy can get them to benefit them personally and address their needs, you want to say, for example, by adjusting these settings, you will keep your photos, your identity, your birth date, your location uh, close and personal just to you or just your friends, which is so totally different than you got to do this or else. Okay. That said, in doing so, there's a lot of temptation from where we're coming from to use the jargon of who we are and what we do. A good example is from my own experience in cybersecurity. For a number of years, I worked for a provider of, get ready to yawn, TLS and SSL certificates for data encryption and website server authentication. Like, oh my God, that's jam-packed full of gobbledygook that the average ordinary person who needs to make a decision isn't going to understand. So instead of saying, well, we do blah, 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 the way to put yourself in their shoes is, here's what we do. As a user, you know that when you're doing your online banking, it's you, and there's a big, scary internet in between, and then there's your bank. What we do is we keep everything private so nobody can read it in between. That's what we sell. So very quickly, I can meet them where they are. I can understand their priorities, what they want to do. I can address their needs, but I also want to use language that's totally accessible to them. That's the relevance part.
I love that so much. Even that small example, just it clicked right in my head. And now you've also, bought me in, so I'm ready to hear your next message after that. So I
Okay.
really
Yep.
love the relevance part. And so you also talked about motivating too.
Yes.
So how do you motivate without using fear-based messages, which is the theme for us today on Halloween, fear-based
Oh
messages?
my goodness.
Uh,
Right.
because it doesn't always work. And it's easy to use fear-based messaging in a privacy or a cybersecurity world just because we protect stuff, but it doesn't always work. So how do you motivate without fear?
As a dad, I'm going to do something that I didn't warn you about. Okay. It's a dad joke coming. Ready?
I'm ready.
Knock, knock.
He's there.
Boo.
Boo-hoo.
Exactly. You can't scare people, and it's only going to make them cry. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's not, it
Oh my
doesn't work. Totally fell for it.
God.
Um, we were talking on the pre-show about a communications framework that I use of AIDA, getting people's attention, their interest, their desire, and then causing action. Fear kind of works depending on where you're coming from in the attention, but on causing interest and desire and action, no bueno. The reason is because it causes kind of helplessness. Oh my gosh, it's so negative. Do I really want to do I want to rip off that Band-Aid and do these things? And that causes some disengagement. We don't want that among the people who are trying to cause them to do something. On the other hand, for interest and desire and action, if you're giving them positive messaging, it makes them feel like I can do this. I see the outcome and it's positive to me. And it it allows for other things to happen and unlock some other stuff. We'll talk about snowballs here in a minute. Um, so an example here. The negative is your data will be stolen. You don't want to be that, 40% every blah, blah, blah that gets their identities exposed. Okay. Instead, how about if you flip that around and you say, you actually have the power to be in that 60% who haven't been impacted by these things. So I may have gotten your attention with something scary, that 40%, but the follow-up message that's going to make you feel like, yeah, I can do this. Remember, stepping in their shoes is you can be part of that 60% who know how to protect their information by taking these 3 steps, this 1 step, what have you. Helpful?
Got it. So can you tell me that acronym IADA? What is it
Repeating
again?
for the audience and for you, AIDA, AIDA.
Yeah. So
Attention, interest, desire, action. You cause those things in a row. They go in that order.
okay, so attention could be negative, But if
Hmm.
you want interest, action, what was the, sorry, you have to write this down for me.
Attention,
Okay,
interest,
interest,
desire,
desire.
action.
Okay.
Somebody put it in chat.
With a
Um,
leader three, you need to have a positive message because the fear
Absolutely.
might not have let you motivate and drive you to action. So attention
Absolutely.
here is good, could
Yep.
be good, but for the others, it needs to be a positive.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because there's a shock value that gets people's attention, but you don't want to push it through that too far from that because then people feel like, wow, this is depressing. I'd rather just not deal with that.
Yeah.
Don't go
And you
there.
shut down. I love that example too of like, you have the power to do these three steps.
Yep.
So that
Yep.
was very interesting. Okay, so then driving the action part, how do you get people to do stuff? Because that's a lot of what privacy professionals have to do. Like, hey, we
Yeah.
need to do this for this reason. Uh, and you tell them, but it doesn't actually turn into reality. There's
Mhm.
usually a disconnect where people have like great policies on privacy, but in action, it's like the wild, wild west. So, how do
Right.
you drive action?
Absolutely so. And remember, we're talking about getting individuals to do something. Okay, so remember, going back several weeks, the topic was we have an impacted group who really needs to take some steps. How do we get them to get there? And this applies not just to them and that discussion, but all the way around and getting people to do stuff. Um, first thing I want to cover here is the not the 3 second rule. It's the power of three. Now, there's different versions of power of three. Power three simply is keep it simple. Okay. Keep it simple. And you're going to give them no more than three things to do. Okay. Don't try to give them 10. We know that there's 10. We know there's probably 20. There's way more than that. Stick to three. If people can remember three, and even if they don't remember three, they're going to remember two. Good place to start. Kind of an opposing technique or an alternative technique to the threes is what I call um, a snowball. Okay. Um, Snowball, if you imagine, starts at the top of the hill with one small thing, the right shape, and as it goes down the hill, it becomes bigger and bigger and bigger. Okay. So uh, we're coming out of Cybersecurity Awareness Month. Okay. I've been participating in that. And were I gun to head, were there anything that you can do, the average ordinary human for cybersecurity and beefing up their own personal cybersecurity, I would say make sure that you're using good passwords. Okay, so I'm going to violate some sensibilities or at risk of it. We like to say in cybersecurity, well, I like to say in cybersecurity, with apologies to Sir Mix-a-Lot, your password has to be long and strong and down to get the friction on. It's got to be so complex. It's got to be the maximum of what you can use in gobbledygookism. Okay. If if you do that, that's the beginning of the snowball, which then enables other things to happen. So in choosing your own snowball, you want to pick things that are cornerstone. Okay. And it's fundamental because if you do this, then the next bit of snowball is just a lot easier to accomplish. Like if you use a long, strong, unique password, you're probably going to want to use one on every site. Uh-oh, how do I do that? I use a lot of websites and I have a lot of apps with passwords. Well, you want a password manager, which is the next recommendation, the snowball group. Okay, well, is that going to make me strong enough? Actually, there's more that you can do. You can use multi-factor authentication, which, by the way, you don't want to say to end users. Multi-factor, oh my God, that's crunchy and use an MFA, use a second factor, an alternative to the password or something that makes it stronger, because then your strong password, reinforced by password managers, now are backed up by multi-factor authentication, the password that accompanies your password. You see then that you get this snowball effect growing, where if you get that one core thing, then you can add more onto it. And you don't have to get that temptation of doing the first thing, the second thing, the third thing, and overwhelming people. You're meeting them at the point of their own, of what they can actually accomplish.
I love that. So you really want to focus on that first snowball being the right shape. So
Yep.
the first action you're asking someone to take, make it the right action and
And
then
small.
go from there. I love that. What I'm thinking through is like anxiety. Like if you have a lot of steps, people are like, "Oh my gosh, I'm not even going to start because this is
Right.
causing me anxiety." Like I'll put that off when I have time to do 10 things. But
Right.
if you get them to do one and another, I could see
Right.
that it's actually leading towards the action that you want. So
Right.
um, instead
And
of keep,
imagine the layering.
yeah.
You get them to do that small thing. You create the snowball. Don't go and then ruin it with fear stuff. The snowball becomes bigger because they feel like they can accomplish things and they're getting it done. And wow, I can do this, I can do that. Give me the next thing.
Oh, you know what, Jeff? This is so fascinating because even in like a sales world, you want to get sales strategy, everybody. You want to get someone to say yes to anything, something very, very small. Get them to say yes because it's easier to say yes after that. It's the same thing, what you're talking about. It's really selling. You're selling the idea of, hey, let's get your passwords in order.
Right.
Oh,
Right.
there's a lot of synergies here. So, okay, we've talked quite a bit. I'm sure the audience has a lot of questions. We've got 10 minutes, so I'm going to shut up. Let's turn off the recording, Ryan, and open the floor to the audience. Feel free to come off mute.